Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaba. A warm welcome to Muslima Insight. Today in Muslima Insight, we are going to look at the topic of abusive relationships. And with me in studio to share with us their vast knowledge as well as their experience in this particular field, I've got Sister Nazmira Khamisa, an integrative psychiatrist, qualified both in the UK as well as in South Africa. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Sister.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you for having me, Adila.
Thank you so much for coming through again. We really appreciate it. And then I've also got Sister Abida Davis, who is a social activist busy with community work for the past 30 years and also responsible for the El Dorado Women's Forum that was started way back in 1984. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Sister.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you coming through. Sisters, when we come to this topic of spousal abuse, abusive relationships, we know that statistically in South Africa, it is one of the most highest incidences rated in the world is domestic violence. And it is South Africa. 1 in every 6 women stand to be abused by their partner. 46% of cases flows from the partner through to the children. So we can see the statistics in South Africa is really very rife. When we come to this topic, what would you describe abuse as?
Abuse is the actions and behavior of one individual actions taken by them in order to control another human being. So control them by physical abuse, by intimidation, emotionally, psychologically, with manipulation, coercion, threats. And the ultimate goal of an abusive individual is to have complete control over another human being.
Absolutely, Sister.
Yes. No, I do agree with my sister. Yeah, it is a form of power, a power play. Because the more I frighten you, the more power I have over you, and the more subservient you'll be. So in many cases, like you said, it is very rife in South Africa also, because we have the common law marriages. And that contributes to it, because a lot of men feel that I pay for you, so I'll abuse you. And in the other side of the coin, where men are married to the woman in the other societies, they feel that there's a need to control. Perhaps also because women of today are not as subservient as our mothers used to be. So that is why abuse becomes more and more rife in our societies.
And there's definitely something that we need to start taking a serious look at, of course, because we cannot allow it to perpetuate, because it breaks down the children, breaks down the nucleus of the family. And just for the sake of our viewers, let's start off also to give them hope, to give them that security that is there a South African law that protects all citizens from abuse, from harm? Are you aware of anything?
Look, we do have human rights laws, protection of basic human rights, the right to safety, the right to access to treatment, and and these are laws based on the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And then we also have things like the Children's Act, which specifically protects children from abuse, and it's quite a detailed and specific piece of legislation. And I'm sure that there are also plenty of laws which sort of deal with women and domestic violence and abuse as well, but I don't know as much about them as I'm sure.
No, there is a law that protects women against domestic violence. It's a domestic violence
Is it perhaps Act 116 of 1998, I believe, that covers domestic violence per se, that you're perhaps referring to?
It could be that one, yes. I also am aware that in 1998 there was a law that was brought forward that the police actually had to retrain in domestic violence to be able to handle that.
I think that is the particular one.
So, yeah, I think that is it. But also because of domestic violence is such a difficult subject. Because it doesn't just stop at the woman that lives with a man or her children. It can become something that is extended to the other families as well.
Sure.
So domestic violence is a terrible thing to live with, especially for children who witnesses these things in the home. They eventually find that this is normal.
Yes, and that is the biggest problem that we're sitting with, that children look up to the mother, they look up to the father, and if they see that, they start, like you say, that it's normal. Sister, from your side, your experience in that?
With regard to children in situations like that, you know, these days, emotional abuse is defined as a child witnessing their parents be abusive to each other. It is one of the definitions of emotional abuse of the child. So this has far-reaching consequences, not only for that child, but for them growing up into adulthood with regard to the rates of depression, anxiety. You know, we have children who are exposed to childhood adversity and neglect as well in those types of situations, who later also develop bipolar mood disorder. So we also know now that it leads to higher rates of that. So there are very much far-reaching consequences with regard to the child themselves growing and developing into an adult, their own health, as well as what Sister Abida said, where the behavior becomes normalized, and also, you know, children do what we do. They don't do what we say.
Exactly.
So modeling will take place, and the chances are that those children will repeat those patterns and possibly repeat that behavior. There is a very high risk of that happening, but what we do have to recognize as well is that abuse is a choice. So being in an abusive relationship, if you're a woman in an abusive relationship, the fact that, or a man, of course, your partner's parents did this to each other is not an excuse for that individual to continue to perpetuate that, because ultimately it does become a choice when you reach adulthood. However, it's a big risk factor.
And would you say that perhaps within South Africa, thinking of apartheid, thinking of the history that the country comes from, would you say more attention can be given to men's mental health because of the baggage that they come with? Men are taught boys don't cry, so that bottling up that many men have to walk around with, and the only place they tend to take it out is at home.
Absolutely.
Sister, your experience in that?
Yeah, there's a saying that goes like this. They say you always hurt the person you love the most. So that can be
Why would you say that is? Why would we do that? Are we more safe?
Yes.
Do we feel safe? Do the abuser feel safe in doing that?
It is a safety factor, because this person that I'm abusing is not going to be able to hurt me more. I can hurt this person more. So they do not fear abusing this person that they love, because there's always this love factor. Oh, she loves me. She won't leave me. She won't do that. Many people go for protection orders, men and women, because you find that the men are also being abused in very serious ways nowadays. And also, we have a changing society where men live with men and women live with women. So nowadays, you can't just say it's the man or the woman, you know.
Absolutely.
And the protection order is a very specific document. I always say to the people that I'm helping, don't leave out something that you want to be protected against. Like if you don't want that man to come into a certain area in your home, write it down in there. Because everything that's in that protection order, if you call the police and he has overstepped that boundary, they will arrest him. But if it's not in there, they can't do anything.
So the law clearly is there for protection as a means for people to have access to the legal route to protect themselves. If we move a little bit forward and we look at the different types of abuse, I mean, obviously physical abuse causes bodily harm. It's there to hurt the person physically. But beyond that, I think there are different types of abuses that goes under the radar because it doesn't leave a mark. If we can just elaborate a little bit on, for example, the emotional abuse, psychological abuse, what have you come across?
Absolutely. These are the types of abuse that you're talking about, which are swept under the rug, unseen, leave no scars or bruises on the body, but they do on the soul and on the mind. And a lot of the time, people tend to underestimate it, overlook it. It's easy to deny when somebody has emotionally abused you, they will deny it and say, I didn't, or I didn't say that. And generally they say that emotional and psychological or mental abuse is designed to break down the individual, to chip down at their self-worth and their self-esteem, so that they become somebody who is completely dependent then on the abuser. They tend to become somebody who feels they cannot live without the abuser, that they are not good enough, that there's nowhere for them to go. And this is a systematic breaking down of an individual on a psychological and an emotional level, and it seems to be very effective.
On that note, Sister, I'm just going to hold your thoughts there. It's time for us to go to a break. Don't go away. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A warm welcome back to Muslima Insight. Sister Hamisa, before the break, we were talking about emotional and psychological abuse. And I want to ask, what are some of the psychological effects it has on the victim? What actually happens to the victim?
Look, victims of emotional and psychological abuse tend to become very dependent on their abuser. They tend to have difficulties with self-esteem and self-worth. They do become confused sometimes because the abuser systematically will attempt to confuse them, to deny things that they have actually done, to sort of make them feel as if they're going crazy. This is what a lot of women in these types of relationships do describe. A feeling like maybe there's something wrong with me, or if the the male or the female, if I am being abused by him or her, there must be something wrong with me. It must be my fault. And a lot of the time, this is something that the abuser intends to do, to make you believe that it is your fault. Somehow you are responsible for their abusive behavior. It goes to further extremes where individuals become addicted to drugs and alcohol, depression.
Is that to escape the abuse, in other words?
A lot of the time it does happen because of that. It's self-medicating plenty of the time, when they do become depressed or anxious because of what's happening to them, and they are not seeking treatment and they need to get themselves to feel better. They tend to use that as an escape or to self-medicate their symptoms. It even can lead to extreme cases where people become suicidal. Another sort of very sad consequence is the abuser becoming, or the abused becomes the abuser. So, for example, a mother who is being abused by her husband will then take that out, the frustration and the aggression, on her children, for example.
Would it be an attempt by her to then feel in control, to restore that which has been broken down?
Absolutely, and it's an unconscious need, which is then expressed in that way, which then is followed by a lot of guilt, of course, and then we get that vicious cycle, which then worsens the depression and the mood and the vulnerability of this individual.
Sister Davies, from your experience, what would you say does the abuser do to the victim?
Oh, he goes to the fields with the victims. In our experience, that it's so lucky for him to call her names because he see her crumble. And the more names they call, our minds are like a sponge. If from birth we've been told how ugly and fat we are, we become that. So he knows that, and he will call her all the kind of names. But then after that, there's a honeymoon phase where he shows so much love, and it's so nice, and
he's so good to her.
So now she thinks, there is hope. This is not all
and
bad.
I think that's what Sister was saying, that causes that confusion.
Yes.
The love-hate relationship.
And the always hope that things will come right.
Yes.
That's how he keeps her there.
That's how he keeps her. And that is just now on the emotional side. Then you have the monetary side, the economical side, where he will only give you so much to buy bread maybe, or to buy this or that.
That's again that control. You're going to come to the economic abuse. Does he ridicule the victim? Is there ridicule involved, name calling?
Yes.
What else? Does he isolate her?
Isolation can happen where he keeps her away from her parents, or, some men goes to the extent where when they leave the home, they lock the doors. So she can't even go out into the yard.
That is shocking.
And I had a case where this man will go out at night with his friends to go and party. But then early hours of the morning, he would jump through the fire escape on the roof to see who's in the house with her. So they too have a psychological problem.
There's a huge psychological problem that goes on there.
And that is where it goes further into stalking and all that other type of abuses.
Yeah. And coming to the economical side of abuse, can you elaborate for us on that?
If you depend on your husband or your spouse or your wife for every cent that you need to spend in the house, you become so dependent that this is now your little God.
And you have to be submissive.
You can't misbehave because then you're not going to get it. So you fall into a pattern. And the woman, let's say the woman, for argument's sake, the woman gets to know that this is how I should behave if I want that. I should go to bed with him tonight if I want him to buy me a dress tomorrow. That type of thing. So economical abuse is a very powerful tool as well. Where if you don't, when I come home and you haven't done this and that and that, no money for you. So you jump at it.
Sure.
And in your head, you're already planning. If I need to do this, I can get that.
So you sit and you compromise and plot and plan how to survive the next day.
Yes.
Sure.
It's coercion, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It might not be overt, but there is a lot of covert manipulation and coercion and intimidation.
But we teach that to our children as well. So the abuse, like you said, sister, it doesn't stay with the parent. It goes to the children as well. And with the men as well that is being abused. It is so funny that even if the man is the breadwinner, he can still be abused economically. Because if you don't give me so much, or if you don't spend so much on me, I can leave you, or I won't do this.
So that's the abuse in reverse again.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So it's not always a case where you need the money to buy the things. It is, if you don't want to do this for me, I won't do that for you.
So it's a versa versa abuse that can happen, of course. And then taking it a little bit further, in coming back to the physical aspect, we know that we have sexual abuse among spouses as well, within marriage.
Yes.
How do we deal with that?
Oh, I think that is hurtful because the partner doesn't know why. I am there. I'm your wife. Why don't we just sleep together? Why did you have to do that? And the reasons that normally comes forth doesn't really make sense, but it's always because I love you. And, after this, there's a kind of resentment, and it can even border on hate. But then, like we said also, the honeymoon phase, where he will do such nice things for you in order to gain your trust and your love again. And then you become confused. And the promise of never ever doing it to you again because I love you so much and you did this for me to do that. And if you say if you didn't do that, I wouldn't have done that. That whole type of conversation that he has with you, afterwards you think, I did it. It was my fault. Yes.
And the abuser designs his behavior to achieve that objective.
And the police doesn't want to hear that it was rape.
Yeah.
They say, hey, you're married. How can it be rape? Don't you give him? Things like that.
Yeah. And the humiliation that the victim then goes against through again.
People don't report it.
1 in 9, apparently, sexual assaults are reported. 1 in 9.
Yeah.
And it's because of the system, I think, as well. The humiliation, initially being that vulnerable, exposing yourself, being brave enough to come forward, and then being humiliated or not believed.
Sure. Leads to another type of abuse again.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
And they do rape you again at the police station, because you have to go through every detail, everything that happened.
Emotionally.
And sometimes they don't even take you into a private room to take your statement. And imagine an 11-year-old girl that's been raped, have to say everything there in front of all the policemen, all the people in the charge office listening attentively now to this juicy story.
It's terrible. It's almost like porn that they're listening.
Yes.
Instead of watching, they're listening to it. And surely we should really start raising this flag and saying we need to start doing things differently. And when you were talking about the economical abuse, what would you say to young girls that are getting married? Because we tend to, when we, like you say, the honeymoon phase, in the real sense of the word, you're getting married, your knight in shining armor has come to rescue you from your circumstances. Now you want to go, get married, be the good housewife, have the children, but are you not shooting yourself in the foot? Exposing yourself to a possible situation where you can be abused. What would your advice be to youngsters?
Oh, they're not going to listen to us, Adila. They're so much in love.
That's youth.
But we were there.
I think it'd be...
And I'm so sorry.
No.
And if you do tell the person to watch out for the loopholes, I think one of the main things is that that person must work and become financially independent.
Absolutely.
And that at least give her a chance. Yes. Not to fall under the souls of her partner, but to be able to stand up for herself and just do whatever she needs to do in the house.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's once again time for us to go to a break. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A warm welcome back to Muslima Insight. Sister, before the break, we were touching again on the economical abuse, and obviously it is clear that not only does a woman have to consider going out and working, not only to become self-empowered, but also for the possibility of the man changing. What is your views on that from the time they get married?
There's no telltale signs of what's going to happen when you are married. Because if you go out with this guy for 5-10 years, you get to know that he is so kind, so nice, and that is why you get married to him. But sometimes after marriage, then the true colors come out. And if you are, we're not saying you must work. It's just a suggestion that you can be economically powerful in your own rights. But when you are married and he changes in that type of form, then at least the telltale signs comes that time only, and you have something to fall back on.
So would you say education also then plays obviously an important role?
Very much so. Very much so. Also, if once you see that this man is abusing you, whether it be in any of the forms, be aware that very seldom they change. So if it starts with physical abuse, look out for what is happening and make a plan.
Definitely. Talking about physical abuse, I think there's one that I've researched as well that is really under the radar as well, and that is intimidation. Sister, in your experience, what have you come across?
It doesn't leave scars on the body, but it instills fear and anxiety and terror.
What kind
of consequences? For example, if somebody were to smash something in your house or punch the wall right next to you, this is a threat. Or keep weapons. Sometimes they keep weapons at home or on display, or so it's designed almost to make the victim very, very aware of the consequences if they were to disobey or to act out of accordance of what the abuser expects from them and wants from them. So it is a threat of harm, and emotionally it can be quite crippling.
And do you think there is physical aspects that the victim can start having, in the sense of heart palpitations, biological stuff that can start going wrong with the victim?
Yes, absolutely. Anxiety is one of the things that happens first, tends to happen first. Depression tends to develop with long-standing abuse and breaking down of the person's self-esteem and self-worth, and the hopelessness also that comes with being in a situation like that. But the anxiety tends to have the physical symptoms that you're describing. For example, sweaty palms, shaking, sort of feeling out of breath, getting your heart palpitations, jitteriness, muscle tension, clenching your jaws, or sort of having these really tense muscles on your shoulders, and a feeling of fear and worry, constant worry that goes with that. Are part of the initial symptoms, if we're thinking about anxiety type of symptoms. And then when you look at depression coming in, physically, your body takes a toll because your appetite is generally affected. Often people lose their appetite, but some people do tend to then overeat and self-medicate with food. So, losing weight or gaining weight and then developing other complications from that, like diabetes, cholesterol problems. There's various physical things that we can look at when it comes to that as well. So your body will take a toll, because if your mind is under strain and your emotional body and your soul is under attack, your body will take a toll, even if there are not actual bruises on it.
Sister Davies, in your experience?
The Eldorado Bachman Forum deal with so many abuse cases of women and children. We even have a shelter. And when we do take them to the shelter, it is women with their children, but boys only up to 12 because of the fear, So all the shelters only takes boys up to 12. And we experience that they can't sleep afterwards. And when they are
horrendous.
When they are away from that situation, they don't know what to do with themselves. They, like you said, the hopelessness is a very big factor, because now they're at peace. But this is a strange feeling, and they do not know how to deal with it. Then they take it out on the children, and they have to unlearn the actions that they had to learn in the house.
Unwitnessed.
And the children too, because now it's like...
And it's almost like that they don't know how to deal with that energy of just calm and peace.
Yes, they don't.
Would you say in these shelters you would find that sense of fear, what's going to happen next?
Yes.
what does the future hold? What does the center do to help create a new reality, a new day for them? We at Eldorado Park actually had started skills training, because we realized once that person, a lot of them are women that has never worked, or that has worked but hasn't worked for so long that they're not employable enough, or the age factor, there's lots of reasons.
Sure.
But we've found that it's best to teach them a skill. The computer skills or sewing skills or making candles and things that they can sell afterwards and get some money for themselves and their children. A lot of women go back to the situation because they don't have other place to go to. They don't have family that can take them in, because the families have their own problems, and many of our families are too large to still take care of more family members. So they take all that into consideration. There's also a great thing that happens while they are there, is that they do get counseling all the time, because they need to clear their minds.
And they need to heal.
Healing inside and all that, yes. So they go through counseling, they go through a kind of a therapy where if they feel they need to talk now, the support group inside that shelter becomes very, very helpful, because the women have the same experiences. So I might sit with you and hear that this is what you went through, and I identify with you. So we become close, and we start talking, and we cry, and our children see that now we're becoming calmer, and they start reforming. And also with us at the Eldorado Park, we speak to the principals of the various schools around, whether it's a high school or, a private school, to help the child fit into the normal society and still attend school. Because we try to normalize the situation.
Yes.
And having them in a school with other children does not make them feel alienated.
Yes.
Alienated.
Yes.
So it's very important that they are in the society. And having shelters out there doesn't work, because then they feel that they're outcasts.
Yes.
They feel there's something wrong. We cannot reveal where the shelters are, because in our experience, men has come trying to burn down the house or break into or whatever. But the police in that case, I'm so proud of them there, I must say. They have never let us down. The minute we pick up the phone, within 5-10 minutes, they're there. So they have helped us quite a lot. Believe me that the men are so brazen, they will jump the fences, try to break the windows and things like that. But like I said, the police has always been on time.
That is wonderful to hear. Sister, coming to the profile of the abuser, be it male or female for that matter, is how would you define a person from their outer behavior?
Abusive individuals tend to instill fear in people around them. They do tend to be quite confident, usually, from the outside. And they instill fear into people who they are in intimate relationships with. So it seems kind of counterintuitive to be afraid of somebody that you love.
Exactly.
But you will find that the victims of these abusers will sort of not go to their friends and family, or avoid people, be socially isolated. And the signs are often more visible in the victim than they are in the abuser. Abusers, if you think about with regards to personalities, like personality traits or personality disorders, you tend to find that people with antisocial personality traits and narcissistic type of personality traits do become abusive, or do have a higher risk of becoming abusers. So the person that is full of themselves, overly confident, arrogant, egotistical, sort of untouchable, above it all, in control, dominant.
And would you say that many of that personality traits, again, comes about from childhood? Would you say a person like that were exposed to physical abuse of his own mother or own siblings or own parents? And is this a coping mechanism? Is this just a mask they're wearing? Or what would you say?
It's common. It happens. It's often a learned behavior, exactly the way you described it.
Jazakallah, sister. It's once again time for us to go to a break. Don't go away. Assalamu alaikum, a warm welcome back to Muslima Inside. Sister Hamisa, before the break, we were starting to look at the profile of the abuser. What does the abuse really say about the inner state of the abuser? What is really going on that he or she abuses?
There can be many reasons for the abuse, and there can be many internal states that abusers are going through. For example, depression. Sometimes people who abuse other people are actually depressed. They are depressed, they are irritable, and they say that a lot of the time depression is lashing out at the self. Whereas the external expression of depression is lashing out at others. So sometimes people who are in that state, or even people with bipolar mood disorder in manic phases who become extremely irritable, can become abusive physically and emotionally. That tends to be quite impulsive in that aggression, and it's episodic in relation to when they are actually psychologically and mentally unwell. The most common thing that we find in abusers is that they are insecure, internally insecure, with this facade of an egotistical and perfect narcissistic personality, and they then lash out. And many of them are systematic in their abuse. They can control it. They tend to want their victims to believe, and people around them to believe, that they can't control it. I'm sorry it happened, it wasn't me. Making excuses, blaming others, blaming themselves, never, but blaming the victim or any other circumstances for what they've done, as if they couldn't control it and it was a mistake, you know. But you'll notice that they don't abuse just anyone. So they choose their victims quite carefully. They don't abuse people just anywhere at any time. It tends to be in private, at home, when nobody's around. They even abuse physically, for example, will hit somebody in a spot where it will be covered by their clothing, rather than on an exposed area. So even the blows that they inflict physically are premeditated.
It's carefully planned.
Yes.
And would you say, if we just go back to what we were discussing before the break, what can you tell us about the upbringing of the abuser? If even that's the one question and I would like to also ask is, how will an abuser recognize him or herself? Is there any chance of that? But let us go to the first question is, where does it come from? Is it conditioning? Is it programming from childhood?
It is in many cases. In many cases, the abused becomes the abuser, or the witness of abuse becomes the abuser. It's not an automatic thing, because ultimately, like I said earlier, it is a choice. Abuse is ultimately a choice. So it's not an excuse, but also we need to understand where it comes from. Because if you think of a little girl or a little boy, nobody grows up wanting to hurt and abuse anyone else and be damaging to other people that they love, especially. So in order to try to understand the behavior, it is quite common in children who experience and witness abuse in their childhood. And then they model this behavior and they repeat it. There are women who, for example, witness their fathers abusing their moms, who then become battered women. And then there are boys who witness their dads doing it, and they become abusive towards their partners or wives or children. So in order to try and understand the abuse, and in order for them to get the right treatment and the right help, there needs to be very specific and specialized treatment for them in order to look at this intimidation, the impulse control problem that they have.
I want to just come in there that's obviously when they have started therapy. How do you get the abuser to, in the first place, take responsibility? It's like an alcoholic. That person can only go for treatment if they take responsibility and acknowledge, I am an abuser, or I am so-and-so. How do you get them, what can we as laypersons do to start pointing out to them this or that or the other?
It is very difficult. It is very difficult. They are very resistant, manipulative, deceptive, and the personalities are sometimes so strong that they fizzle out over time, over age. But there's always hope. And I think, for people to speak out, a lot of the time it happens when children begin to reach adolescence and grow up and then stand up to an abusive parent, where they begin to see the reality of what it is that they are doing. It's not always the case that they will agree or admit or take responsibility, but that is one of the things that does help. The wife speaking out, communicating, and communicating in a non-judgmental way, being specific about their actions and how it makes you feel, which is difficult because they tend to demean that and belittle and not actually take your feelings seriously. So it is quite difficult in that situation. But I think being supportive, being there for a victim and for the abuser, and letting them know that you are not judgmental, that you are willing to help, and then educating them.
So would you say from the victim's perspective, it's not to take responsibility for the abuser, but it's a sense of responsibility to them as you would have towards your neighbor or the next person, in the sense if you're picking up that your spouse seems to be depressed or he seems to be overly confident or arrogant, is to, in a non-judgmental way, start probing, like how we would our kids, what's going on, how has your day been, so that we start to help the abuser to start seeing a different view of himself.
Yes.
Would that help?
I think so, because I think being supportive and being observant and pointing out their behaviors to them sometimes, but in a non-judgmental way.
Because we don't want to...
And a non-attacking way. Sometimes it's very enlightening because we often don't realize what our behavior is until somebody says it to us. And it's often important to be confronted with that. Maybe not necessarily by the actual victim, by the partner, but by other people around them, family members or friends.
This brings me to the victim herself or himself. Is coming to the profile of the victim is, like you have now said, it is important that they have a support structure. Like you have rightfully said, other than just the victim trying to reform or point out, because obviously the person is traumatized, the victim herself might be depressed and difficult to speak out, so it is important to have that support structure.
Absolutely vital, I think.
It is very vital that your family, not just your immediate family, but your extended family also support you. That is where you get your strength from. And once you have that, you become strong enough to stand up against abuse, because the minute you know you have somewhere to go, if you need to run, it's a help. If there's somebody on the outside that says, I can get you away from the situation, it's a help.
Of course.
But the minute you are left on your own, not knowing what to do, you can't think. You stay in that state of mind of being a victim. And that is why many women, especially who gets away from this situation, will say, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. Because they have survived all that abuse. And they are not transmitting it onto anybody else.
No, they break the chain.
They break the chain just there. So they have survived it.
Sister Hamisa, coming back to the profile of the victim, what makes a victim stay for so long? I mean, alhamdulillah, there are cases like the sister have said that they do get out of it, but it's with a lot of work, a lot of effort. What happens psychologically to the victim that it causes her to stay?
We have the cycle of abuse. So it's quite a typical and classic thing that happens. The abuse happens, he feels or she feels guilty, maybe not for actually abusing, but guilty maybe of being found out by other people, or that there will be consequences. And then afterwards, they begin a process of charm, and the charismatic side comes out, and winning them back, and the honeymoon phase. And so it tends to be a cycle of abuse, and then something excellent and amazing will happen, and they will win you back and be so apologetic and promise to change. And then, you know, this slowly then leads back to fantasies of abusing again, and then setting up the individual, and then abuse again. So I think that there is a hope that gets instilled in victims of abuse. There's always this lingering hope that maybe it will change, maybe things will get better. And abusers tend to promise that, that I'm sorry, things will change, things will get better. And, you know, with the systematic breaking down of their self-worth and with the emotional abuse, you get a lot of dependence. So, you know, victims become dependent and are very vulnerable and afraid to be alone, afraid to be without their partner.
Because of that lack of thinking they can do things, they can achieve things.
Who will take care of me? That is a big thing.
And the comfort zone, the comfort zone that a lot of women step into. Sister, very quickly from your side, if ladies would like to start, or people out there would like to start a women's forum specifically designed for abuse in their respective communities, where can they start?
If there's 3 or 4, 2 or 3 even, and they feel very strongly about starting something like that, first get a house or a room or somewhere where you can operate from. Because if you need to take the lady away from the situation, you have to know where to take her to. Get her, speak to your police station, your commander, tell him this is what you intend doing. They will help you by coming out when you call them. You don't have to have any degrees or whatever. I'm a lay counselor. I went for training in counseling, and I don't have a degree in psychology or whatever. It was just us feeling that women need to get out of this situation.
Yes.
So start from a very small start. It doesn't matter where, and get your community to stand behind you, even if there's just your family, because we normally start with our families.
Sure.
You know, so they support us, and it grows, and then by word of mouth, people will get to know that these are the ladies you can go to when you need help. And that is a small beginning, and it will grow.
Inshallah. Jazakallah so much for being here today and sharing that with us. Sister Hamisa, closing statements very quickly from your side.
Get help. Help is available. We are here to help you, and you are not alone. And there is always hope.
Thank you so much for your strong statements. Very simple, but to the point. People are here to help. And inshallah, maybe always remember the teachings of our Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam that teaches us not to do unto others as you wish for yourself, and also not to belittle anyone or anything, for the innermost being of everyone and everything desires the same. And all of us desire respect, love, kindness, and maybe take that with us. From myself, Adila, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.